Warning, this episode may contain disturbing content, soothing narration, and mild existential dread. Basically, murder ASMR for stressed professionals. Listener discretion is advised. Hell, it might be necessary.
He said it was an attack of conscience. He said that he knew who had masterminded the Whiskey A Go-Go fire, the fire that claimed the lives of 15 innocent people. He said he could no longer stay silent. He said a lot of things, especially once he took the witness stand. Because before Daniel Stuart walked into a police station and pointed the finger at his own brother, John, the two had been very close. They'd survived the same abusive childhood. They'd both built careers breaking the law. And if there was one rule criminals tended to take seriously, it was loyalty. So what changed? Was it really a crisis of conscience, or was it $50,000? Because that's what police were offering for information leading to the arrest of whoever was responsible for the Whiskey A Go-Go fire. $50,000. In 1973, that wasn't just a generous reward, it was life-changing money. Today, it would be worth nearly 600,000 Australian dollars, or roughly 420,000 US dollars. Enough to buy a house, enough to change your future, enough to make almost anyone stop and think. But some people have suggested Daniel Stuart wasn't motivated by the money at all. They believe he had a much more immediate problem, because Daniel Stuart wasn't exactly an innocent bystander in any of this. He knew dangerous people. He had his own criminal baggage. And in an era where organized crime had influence inside police departments, knowing too much, or being suspected of knowing too much, could become a very dangerous place to find yourself. So was Daniel selling out his brother, or was he trying to save himself? Whatever his reason, Daniel Stuart betrayed his own brother in spectacular fashion. And once he did, there was no putting the story back in the box. And that's where we're picking up this week in Part 5 of Foretold, Australia's Whiskey A Go-Go fire, right here on Crime to Burn. Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark city landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. Welcome back to Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer, former firefighter, and a questionably well-adjusted but fiercely loyal pyro podcaster.
And I'm just here on a rider, a very specific rider.
If you're new here, you may want to head back and start this series with Part 1, because this is Part 5, and we are officially deep in the sauce. But if you're the kind of person who eats dessert before dinner, I'm certainly not going to stop you. Whether you've listened from the beginning or you've embraced the absolute gremlin chaos of listening out of order, we do need one tiny favor from you. The good news is it costs you absolutely nothing. Open your podcast player of choice, hit subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating. Those few seconds help us enormously with discoverability and reassure new listeners that we're worthy of their precious earbuds. Apple Podcasts and Spotify help us the most because we're competing against shows with actual marketing budgets, while we have an unhealthy show budget and unmedicated ADHD. Then you can tell people about us. Seriously, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers, tell your barista, tell that random guy who somehow always ends up talking to you in line at the grocery store. In fact, let's make this interesting. Make a short public video, 15 to 30 seconds, telling people why you enjoy Crime to Burn, post it on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, or wherever you do your social media thing, and then tag us. Then email me the link along with the subject line, quote, bribery, unquote, to crimetoburn@gmail.com. The first 30 people to do that will get a free Crime to Burn sticker, and yes, that includes our international listeners. Normally, I would be far too cheap to volunteer for international postage, but considering this entire series has been basically a love letter to our Australian listeners, it seemed like kind of a dick move to not include you. So, I will put all the details in the show notes, so don't feel obligated to start writing this down while you're driving. If making videos isn't your thing, that's okay too. Every like, comment, share, favorite, and save on our posts helps to convince the social media algorithm that we're slightly less terrible than they currently believe that we are. So every interaction helps us reach more eyeballs and ear holes. And what can I say? I want to reach all of the orifices in your head.
I'm not sure if They should ask for lube, or they just should take it dry.
We're still sitting at 78 ratings on Apple, and now we're also tied with 78 on Spotify. So a special thanks to Lisa Listens for leaving us a few Spotify episode comments. And we have Rena Grotke, Sophie Brown, Just Becky, Kevin Tarrant, and Donna Florian all showing up in the Podbean comments this week. So thank you to each of you for your engagement. And right before we started recording this, we got a new comment from none other than Brian the Eagle Bolton's son. So thank you so much for reaching out and leaving a comment. I will definitely be replying. If you'd like to support the show financially in exchange for ad-free episodes, we'd love to welcome you to the Sacred Snack Table over on Patreon. But if that's not in the budget, no worries whatsoever. Crime to Burn will always be free on your favorite podcast apps, supported by ads. And finally, send us your fire stories, case suggestions, episode feedback, and given this week's topic, your pledges of loyalty at crimetoburn@gmail.com. And I do have some exciting news. I've been emailing back and forth with Mr. Jeff Plunkett this week. He has very graciously answered a few questions I had after I managed to confuse myself while reading his book. And if all goes according to plan, he'll be joining us on the podcast later this month. I will keep you posted. And I can't say this enough. This series only exists in the depth that it does because of Jeff Plunkett's incredible research. His book, The Whiskey A Go-Go Massacre, Murder, Arson, and the Crime of the Century, is built from original police files, court transcripts, coroner's reports, witness statements, and decades of investigative work. And we are on part 5, and we're still not finished.
5 episodes later.
And I've intentionally left out countless fascinating details, bizarre side stories, and entire rabbit holes simply because we would be here for the next 12 hours otherwise. So if you have been enjoying this series, you are absolutely not robbing yourself by picking up Jeff's book. Quite the opposite. There's an enormous amount of information in there that we have not even touched. You'll find the link in the show notes. One quick content warning, the book does discuss violent crimes and includes descriptions of sexual offenses committed by John Stuart and others, so if that's something you'd rather avoid, just keep that in mind before diving in. Now, I don't feel like I have to remind you that we're discussing the firebombing of a Brisbane nightclub, the Whiskey A Go-Go. In the weeks leading up to the fire, John Stuart had been warning police, reporters, and nightclub owners that something terrible was coming. According to Stuart, organized crime figures from Sydney were moving into Brisbane to establish protection rackets. If nightclub owners refused to pay, an empty club would be burned as a warning, and if that didn't work, the next one would be full of people. The problem was that Stuart never gave police enough information to act. No usable names, no addresses, no evidence, just increasingly alarming stories from a man whose version of events seemed to change every time he told them. He also had an odd obsession with creating alibis. He mailed dated postcards to his police contact while he was traveling. He deliberately created memorable interactions with strangers wherever he went. He even suggested to police and nightclub owners that maybe he should just kill the men behind the plot himself, because apparently nothing screams, "I'm a credible witness," like casually floating an assassination plan. Then, on the night of the fire, Stuart was at another nightclub, the Flamingo. Before leaving, he insisted on calling the number to check the time in order to verify the exact time. In the US, we used to call that the time and temperature phone number. I don't know what they called it in Australia, but I heard someone call it the speaking clock this week. And to me, that sounds very Alice in Wonderland, and it makes me oddly uncomfortable.
We're all mad here.
Whatever it was called, John Stuart said it was 2:15 a.m. when he made that call from the Flamingo. The Whiskey A Go-Go had been firebombed just minutes earlier at 2:08 a.m. According to Stuart, he learned about the fire while walking back toward reporter Brian the Eagle Bolton's office to leave yet another irritated note after Bolton failed to show up for a planned meeting. Several blocks away, he saw the commotion and learned from a bystander that the whiskey was burning. His next stop was his sister's house, where he woke her up in the middle of the night and lamented that exactly what he had warned people about had finally happened, and that police were surely going to blame him. Then, the next morning, when his sister-in-law called him and told him about the fire, Stuart acted as though he was hearing about it for the very first time. He even called Detective Basil Hicks to report that he had just learned the news. Knowing police would inevitably want to question him, Stuart decided he wasn't walking into headquarters alone. He wanted a solicitor present. Stuart later claimed that he feared not only a beating, but what was known in Australia at the time as a verbal, which is an allegation that police would fabricate confessions or statements and pressure suspects into signing them.
And you said last week that a solicitor is like a lawyer, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the solicitor he hired wasn't exactly Clarence Darrow. During the interview, police and Stuart's lawyer began arguing over how much the solicitor was allowed to intervene.
Wait, they had a solicitor and a lawyer? Is there a difference?
No, I'm using the terms interchangeably.
Okay.
The lawyer became so uncertain of the law that he left his own client sitting in the interrogation room for about 45 minutes while he went to seek his own legal advice. Probably not the confidence boost Stuart was hoping for. Still, Stuart did give a statement. He explained where he'd been and who he'd spoken to, and why he'd called the speaking clock. And he seemed convinced that he had built himself an ironclad alibi, but police saw it differently. To them, Stuart hadn't necessarily committed the firebombing himself. He may have simply arranged it while carefully constructing an alibi that would make him appear innocent. After roughly 9.5 hours of questioning, Stuart signed his statement and walked out of police headquarters believing the worst was behind him. It wasn't, because for the first time, John Stuart finally started naming names. The man who'd spent weeks insisting he wasn't a rat suddenly identified Graham Lou Miller as being behind the protection racket. Remember, he was the guy that bailed Stuart out of jail. He also claimed that after Miller dropped him off at the airport, 3 men had approached him with the fine details of the plan. They were Les, Ross, and Roger.
That doesn't sound like a lot of information.
It's not. These, Stuart said, were the men he'd previously refused to identify. It was a remarkable change for someone who had repeatedly insisted that naming names violated his personal moral code. And as you'll soon see, those names created some problems. Problems we'll get to, but first, Stuart's about to have some much bigger problems. After his interrogation, Stuart went to his brother Danny's house, and according to Danny's children, the following morning, John looked at them and said, "Wasn't that a terrible thing I did, killing those 15 people? Only thing is, it wasn't me." And then cracks up laughing with his nieces and nephews.
That was funsies. That was hilarious.
Hilarious. It's exactly the sort of statement that leaves everyone wondering whether it was a joke, a confession, or just another one of John Stuart's bizarre attempts at humor. One person, however, was noticeably absent. Best friend Doug. Stuart's English friend, who had been living with him in the days before the fire, was nowhere to be found. Before leaving, Stuart handed Danny's wife, Rose, a list of telephone numbers just in case Doug showed up looking for him. And because this was John Stuart, he couldn't just leave it there. He instructed Rose that the telephone might be bugged, and so if she needed to read all the numbers over the phone to Doug, she should tell Doug they were lottery numbers.
Hey, if your friends start talking weird stuff like that to you, tell them to stop it and get some help.
Later that day, Stuart spent nearly 4 hours with Brian the Eagle Bolton recounting his version of events. He still refused to identify the men by name to Bolton, but he did offer a description. According to Stuart, these men were in their mid to late 20s. They were drug heads, psychopathic killers, with Mexican-style mustaches.
That sounds sexy.
Which admittedly narrows it down considerably. It was the 70s. Who didn't have a Mexican-style mustache?
What are we talking about now? What is a Mexican-style mustache now?
That's actually a really good question. I was just picturing something like
something you see on the Three Amigos on a villain or something?
Yeah. Meanwhile, police announced what was then the largest reward in Australian history. $50,000 for information leading to the arrest of those responsible for what many newspapers were calling Australia's, or at least Queensland's, worst crime ever. The pressure on investigators was immense, and people remembered Brian Bolton's article warning that a nightclub would be firebombed, and they remembered John Stuart's repeated warnings to police, and naturally, people began asking uncomfortable questions. If there had been warnings, why hadn't anyone stopped it? So police now faced 2 enormous challenges. Find whoever had murdered 15 people, and answer growing public criticism about whether the tragedy could have and should have been prevented. Now that afternoon, Danny Stuart and his wife Rose hosted a little barbecue. But John wasn't there. But somebody else finally was. Best friend Doug. The mysterious Englishman who had been living with John in the days leading up to the fire suddenly reappeared. Witnesses described him as looking rough, with 3 or 4 days worth of beard growth, dirty clothes, carrying an overnight bag, and wearing one shoe while carrying the other one because someone had cut the heel out of it.
Someone had cut the heel out of his shoe?
Yeah.
A known person or just a random
Apparently
shoe jacking and molestation of your footwear and then return it to you with sans heel?
Apparently after the fire, Doug had been living in the bush trying to avoid police and at some point injured his foot, which impacted his shoe. And that's why he was only wearing one.
I thought you said someone cut out part of his shoe.
It said that the heel of the shoe had been cut out. We don't know if Stuart or if Doug did it or if he sustained some sort of accident that sheared off part of his shoe. I don't know.
Well, they probably have rocks out there.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a rock.
Maybe. We're also going to find that he got beat up by a kangaroo.
We're definitely not going to be advertising for this brand of footwear.
So Doug shows up looking like a hot mess, and he takes a shower and gets himself cleaned up, and then Danny's brother, John Stuart, arrives. And the two disappeared into a sewing room and shut the door behind them. Later on, Rose, Danny's wife, knocks, and she finds the two men sitting on the floor, reading through the transcript of John's police interview, and according to Rose, she hears John tell Doug, "So, you can see we've got nothing to worry about." But apparently there was something to worry about. Hydration. Because the barbecue had run out of drinks. So Danny and another guest volunteered to go buy more, except they didn't go straight to the store. On the way, Danny pulled the car over and told his friend that he needed to make a telephone call first. He said that he was convinced John and Doug had carried out the Whiskey A Go-Go fire and he couldn't ignore it anymore because his own brother was a murderer. And he was going to turn him in. After making the call and buying the drinks, the two men returned to the barbecue. So John and Doug had decided that they're getting ready to leave to go to the movies. Apparently Danny wasn't about to let that happen. So he started a fight. Not a shouting match, but an actual fist fight. He began by attacking his wife. And then he turned on the friend who had just ridden with him to the store. And the friend eventually wrestled Danny into a headlock, and Danny's there screaming for John to help him. So John rushes in to try to separate the two men. The women and children flee through the courtyard, people screaming, chaos erupts. And then detectives suddenly storm the house. And police later said they stormed the house because they heard women and children screaming and running from the house yelling, quote, "I'm getting out of here, it's going to be a bloodbath," unquote. So they used that as reason to force entry. John Stuart, understandably surprised to find armed detectives suddenly pouring into the house, grabs a knife, and he then proceeds to make what could be generously described as unsolicited surgical recommendations to the police. The detectives were not interested. So there's John Stuart threatening officers with a knife, and officers draw their guns, and so they have guns pointed directly at Stuart, and they manage to disarm and arrest him, and they arrest him for threatening the police with a knife. Meanwhile, Danny, who police later described as drunk, was, in their words, quote, "raining down abuse on everyone still," unquote. And Doug? Doug vanished in the confusion again. But that entire scene, the fight, the arrest, the detectives arriving at precisely the right moment, it wasn't a coincidence. According to police records, Danny Stuart had arranged the whole thing with detectives beforehand. One officer's notebook for that day reportedly contained these instructions, quote, "Walk straight in and Dan Stuart will put on a show to throw suspicion off himself. Search behind the barbecue, and also search in a children's toy horse in the lounge for something," unquote. So if Danny was simply having a crisis of conscience, why did turning his brother in require staging an entire domestic brawl?
Did they find anything in the horse?
We're going to get to that. It seems like a family barbecue cage match sure was a dramatic way to live out your crisis of conscience. But the weird wasn't over, not even close. While police were arresting John Stuart, he suddenly pulled something out of his shoe and tried to eat it. Detectives stopped him, and I don't know exactly how they accomplished that little feat, and quite honestly, I'd rather not picture it. But what Stuart was trying to destroy was a letter addressed to one of his aliases from someone in England. Inside was evidence that Stuart had sent a money order to someone in England. Now, why is that interesting? Because Doug was from England, and Doug had just vanished during the backyard cage match, and police would very much like to have a chat with this mysterious Doug Jones. Stuart, however, insisted everyone was confused. Doug? What Doug? There's no Doug. Nobody ran away. Police had clearly imagined the whole thing. Meanwhile, back at Danny Stewart's house, Doug came back. He didn't say a word. He just walked straight into the sewing room, stayed only briefly, and then walked right back out again. So Danny, who we now know is drunk, leaves to go look for him. And the poor guy that Danny had tried to beat up to stage the arrest for his brother decides that he doesn't trust drunk Danny going out and looking for best friend Doug, so he goes out looking for Danny. This man manages to find Danny and bring him back home. And then Danny points out to him that the police had never even looked behind the barbecue or in the toy horse as they'd been instructed. So this guy goes and he looks behind the barbecue where he finds a rifle. Apparently deciding that leaving a rifle behind the barbecue wasn't the best idea, he took it home for safekeeping and turned it over to police the next day.
What a good Samaritan.
Meanwhile, Danny had reached the point where he apparently felt he had accomplished everything he intended to accomplish for that evening, so he was ready for bed, so he naturally wandered to a nearby golf course to sleep.
Well, where do you sleep? Don't look at me like that. Haven't you ever seen Donnie Darko? This stuff happens.
When he woke up in the early hours of the morning, he finally made it home, and his wife and children were gone. Rose had apparently decided she'd had enough of Danny's abusive behavior and the evening's theatrics, so Danny was alone. Brian Bolton, meanwhile, was busy setting fires of a different variety. The next morning, his newspaper carried the headline, quote, "Heads must roll," unquote. Bolton absolutely unloaded on the Queensland police, accusing them of being naive, deceitful, or just plain stupid. And it wasn't just John Stuart claiming that he'd warned police now. Bolton was publicly stating that he had warned them too, and he was naming names. Not just local officers, he had warned people all the way up to the police commissioner. But for Danny, the hangover after drunkenly turning over your brother to police during a staged backyard brawl is apparently a good time to start reevaluating your life choices. Because the next morning, Danny woke up in his bed to find Doug standing over him, soaking wet. And Doug explained that police had taken his overnight bag and he wanted to borrow some dry clothes. Danny, meanwhile, was having some sort of existential crisis because his wife had left and his kids were gone and he'd blown up his entire family. And so according to witnesses, Danny lamented that his life was ruined and he didn't really care about anything anymore. And Doug's response was essentially, cool, mind if I crash here for a little while, get a little sleep? And Danny was like, sure. So, just to recap, Danny believed Doug had helped murder 15 people, and his response was, yeah, help yourself, go to sleep. So Doug had barely settled in to go to sleep when a group of detectives arrives at the house, and Doug looks out the window, sees police, and immediately takes off running. The police gave chase. Danny, meanwhile, had another helpful suggestion. Apparently, the detectives had missed part of their homework the night before, and he basically was like, hey, you idiots never looked in the horse. So now they looked, and inside the children's toy horse, they found a passport. The photograph was Doug, but the name was James Richard Finch. Danny told detectives that shortly after Doug, or rather Finch, had arrived in Brisbane, John had asked him to hide the man's passport. Police quickly broadcast Finch's description, and it didn't take long before someone spotted him. And when detectives caught up to him, they addressed him as James Finch, and Finch's response? I don't know who you're talking about, never heard of him. He insisted that he was Doug Jones, an English tourist who had arrived in Australia just 10 days earlier. The detective then informed him that this explanation had one small problem because his passport said otherwise. It had also been recovered from Danny Stewart's house. Now, according to the official police record, the detectives then asked Finch why he'd run from police the previous night, and Finch replied, "Wouldn't you, if you'd done what I've done, "Kill me now. Go on, kill me. I deserve it." Apparently, Danny Stewart didn't have a monopoly on theatrical performances. The only problem was, people would spend the next several decades arguing over who actually had written the script. Was James Finch putting on a performance? Or was someone else doing some creative writing? Because according to police, Finch admitted that John Stuart had paid for his flight from England, that he'd become involved in the Whiskey A Go-Go fire, and that he had actually never intended for anyone to die, and that after police arrested John Stuart, he had spent the night hiding in the bush alongside the highway where he claimed he had been eaten by ants and attacked by kangaroos.
Now, one or the other of those two things happening is something, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're eaten by ants and attacked by a kangaroo in one day. That's a bad day, right?
That's a bad day.
You might need some ice cream or something.
Now, before we go any further, we need to meet James Richard Finch, because in many ways, his life mirrored John Stuart's. Finch grew up with a violent alcoholic father, and after his father died, he was labeled, quote, behaviorally difficult, unquote. And he developed a fascination with fire. According to the records Jeff Plunkett uncovered, Finch was a documented firebug by the age of 6. He underwent counseling for aggressive fantasies and was listed as having a history of incendiaryism.
Can I ask a series of questions now?
Yeah, I don't know that I'll have the answers, but you can ask.
How do you become a known, did you say firebug? By age 6, what have you done?
Apparently, he was setting minor fires wherever he could by the age of 6.
This is 1973, and this is to the point where the 6-year-old kid in 1973 is getting some kind of psychological help for setting fires.
Well, he was in his 20s in 1973, so this would have been...
Oh, I thought you
50s.
said... Okay. Oh, that makes it even weirder.
Yeah.
How did they even... Nurse Ratched, like...
I don't know. I don't think we have a ton of records from that time, but the records that Plunkett was able to uncover show that he was definitely treated by mental health professionals and that their files noted that he had a history of setting fires, fire setting.
I feel like I'm going to ask a stupid question because I should already know. They're like, what the f*** was going on where when he was 6, he's burning down? Like, what's going on in this world?
Well, we know that his father was highly abusive and he was an alcoholic. And so he was a child of a very similar environment to what John Stuart was raised in, with a very abusive father that didn't instill in his children a strong moral compass, got by on committing crimes and passed it on.
Raise your boys, Ryder. This is what happens, stupid.
So his mother eventually had enough of him, and she had him admitted to a children's home, but she promised that she would return to get him in a week. She never did. Instead, 9-year-old James Finch was selected as part of Britain's child migration program and put on a ship to Australia. Yes, apparently in the 1950s, the solution to "this child is difficult" was occasionally, "have you tried a different continent?" Once in Australia, Finch's life became a revolving door of institutions, crime, and prison. Like Stuart, Finch later claimed that he suffered horrific abuse while confined in juvenile institutions. And like Stuart, he graduated from petty crime to more serious offenses. And like Stuart, he spent much of his adult life moving between correctional facilities. Eventually, Finch received a 14-year sentence for a shooting. And here's where the story intersects with John Stuart. Because the gun police recovered, it wasn't found on Finch. It was found in the possession of one of his closest friends, John Andrew Stuart. The two had been committing burglaries together and remained close after Finch went to prison. They wrote to each other regularly, and Stuart even persuaded his own mother to write to Finch because Finch's own mother had shown little interest in her son's life or legal troubles. Finch never actually served the full 14 years he was sentenced to, and after serving fewer than 7, he was released and deported back to England in September of 1972. Even after the deportation, the letters between Finch and Stuart continued. So now, if we fast forward to March 1973, Finch is sitting in a Brisbane police interrogation room. And according to the police report, he completely lost control. Detectives described him as punching walls, grabbing officers by the fronts of their shirts, and screaming for them to kill him, because according to Finch, he'd already gone to prison once for John Stuart. So Finch claimed that he had taken the fall for that earlier shooting, while Stuart was the one that had actually pulled the trigger. The report also states that detectives offered Finch medical treatment, which he refused. It also explains that the injuries he sustained during the interrogation might be self-inflicted while he was punching walls and throwing himself around the room. Now, I'm not saying anyone's lying, but it is awfully convenient when a suspect leaves an interrogation room with visible injuries, and the official explanation is that he inflicted all of them himself. Because whether Finch's confession was genuine or something far more complicated would become one of the biggest controversies in the entire Whiskey A Go-Go investigation. According to the statement that was signed by 6 detectives as an accurate account of Finch's interview, the story began a few months earlier back in England. The police said Finch told them that he was settling back into life after being deported when he received a letter from his old friend John Stuart, and Stuart was inviting him back to Australia. Finch supposedly pointed out the obvious, hey, I was just deported, but John's like, not a problem. According to police, Stuart offered to pay for Finch's flight. And the job sounded simple enough. John had been trying to convince the Brisbane nightclub owners that he represented people capable of carrying out violent reprisals if they refused to pay protection money. The problem is nobody believed him. According to Finch's alleged confession, Stuart's solution was to create a demonstration. Just a small fire. Nobody would get hurt. It would scare the nightclub owners into taking the threat seriously, and once the protection racket was established, Stuart promised he would financially look after Finch. So, police claimed Finch also said that Stuart had been studying psychology and believed he'd developed a foolproof way to manipulate the police. While Stuart carefully established an alibi, Finch would remain invisible, and no one would even know he had entered Australia. According to the confession, on the evening of March 7th, Stuart picked Finch up around 11 o'clock. They retrieved 2 empty petrol cans that Stuart had hidden earlier.
Those are gas cans for those of us here in the United States.
Then they siphoned gasoline from parked cars. Apparently, a barking dog interrupted them before they could completely fill both drums. Stuart then drove Finch near the Whiskey A Go-Go, and Finch hid the drums nearby while Stuart headed for the Flamingo Club to establish his alibi. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Finch allegedly rolled both drums to the foyer, struck an entire book of matches, and tossed it inside and ran. After that, according to police, Finch became remarkably vague. He says he caught a taxi, but he refused to say where he went, which is interesting because he'd supposedly just confessed to 15 murders, yet this was apparently where his memory suddenly becomes selective. So police typed up the interview, which was 5 pages. That was it. For comparison, John Stewart's first interview with police was 9.5 hours. When detectives presented Finch with the statement and asked him to sign it, they documented his response as follows, quote, "Gentlemen, I want you to understand my position. I have given you my side of the events, but I have never signed anything. That is always the code I have followed in the past, and that is my desire in this case." So John Stuart wasn't a rat, and James Finch didn't sign documents. Apparently everyone had some sort of code. Detectives then took Finch's statement to John Stuart, and according to police, Stuart's reaction was essentially, "Man, we went to a lot of trouble to set this up, but we never meant to kill anyone." And that was all investigators needed. Both men were charged with 15 counts of murder. John Stuart responded by violently resisting when detectives attempted to bring him before the magistrate. Police said it took 6 detectives to force him into the courtroom, and at one point, an officer had him in a headlock, while several others struggled to restrain his arms as Stuart repeatedly shouted, "I had nothing to do with this." Finch took a different approach. He insisted that the confession wasn't his. According to Finch, the police had written the entire thing themselves, and he said that that's why he had refused to sign it. And he pointed to his injuries as proof that he had been assaulted during the interrogation. 2 men, 2 completely different stories, one saying, "I didn't do it," and the other saying, "I never confessed." And by this point, police were saying that, "Oh, no worries, we've caught the perpetrators." But it would be a long time before people stopped asking whether they'd caught the right ones. And John Stuart? Well, John Stuart isn't done dropping jaws just yet. Come back next week and we'll talk about how a man ends up standing trial for the murder of 15 people without being allowed in the courtroom and without a lawyer to represent him. That's next time on part 6 of Foretold, Australia's Whiskey A Go-Go Fire, here on Crime to Burn.
I'll stay over here on my side. You stay over there on your side. I'm just the cameraman for this radio show.
We have officially broken 100,000 all-time downloads.
Oh, that's pretty sweet.
Ta-da.
High five. Time to open that Prosecco yet?
You okay?
Oh, I felt something crawl down my crack.
I move all the way over here.
You don't normally crawl down my crack.
Don't normally. Hi, loving your podcast so far. Jeff Plunkett sent it to me last night. Your objectivity, too, impresses me because you're questioning a lot of the things that make no sense to me either. I just wanted to correct something, though. As far as I'm aware, Dad, Brian Bolton, approached a police inspector at Fortitude Valley Police Station not far from the WAG. It wasn't Basil Hicks who he asked for the gun. Oh. I'm still unsure if that police inspector is the one who allegedly warned a young constable at that time to not follow through on information he had gained through an informant that would have stopped the Torino firebombing, or at least cornered the arsonists. The young constable, now retired, gave us evidence at the coronal inquest back in 2022 after Jeff's book was released. Therefore, I'm unaware if Dad asking for the gun story is true. So this is Brian Bolton's son. I'm also not denying he may have. It does sound like Dad when he was pissed. He means pissed in Australian.
Like drunk.
Drunk. But the cops knew about Dad too. And for the record, although Dad was a serious alcoholic, drinking was his way of getting stories. A few drinks and lips loosen. He had an amazing ability to retain every detail of information despite his alcohol intake. On a personal level, I'd like to clarify from episode 3 when he helped out Billy Phillips, wife and toddler injured from the letter bombing. The groceries was a genuine act of kindness. Billy himself told me that. Despite my father's many flaws, he was an incredibly decent, empathetic man when sober. As you made mention, you might require 12 episodes minimum. Queensland truly was that bad back then. Thank you, and we look forward to the next one. Cheers, Mark.
That's cool.
So Mark Bolton, that was Brian the Eagle Bolton's son that left us a comment.
And he was referred by...
And he was referred by Jeff Plunkett, who's the author of the book that we primarily used for this episode.
We're all going to have a good time together. We'll be naked and oily.
I don't know about that.
So just naked?
Well, we have a lot of pets in this house, and if we get oily, there's going to be cat hair.
Oh, the hair.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. You're right. You saved me. I didn't think that through. Were you impressed by my wiener haul yesterday?
That was quite the wiener haul. Join the club, lady.
Do I have for services?
You service me.
Mm.
You keep the host happy. If you were a rich celebrity that everyone was clamoring for, what would be your one, unhinged green room demand?
I don't know. I never really thought about a writer before because it was irrelevant.
It still is. I'm just curious what it would be.
We can make that. That is not rocket surgery. That's a sauce. We can make sauce.
I judge foods based on how good of a vessel they are for getting different sauces and creams and gravies into my mouth.
You need a good sauce fairy into your mouth.
That's why I like broccoli so much, because no other vegetable will pick up that much ranch.
Yeah, it's like a capillary action between the little broccules.
In the ranch. It's biology, man.
Yeah, science. Hey, can I offer you a wiener? I have a lot in the freezer.
I had a hot dog and a hamburger because it felt more American that way. I had a banana protein shake for breakfast, and then I had a beer right after, so.
That sounds like a good pairing.
Yeah. You need one more?
One more what?
Beer.
That's a minimum.
Hey, baby, that's the minimum. One beer more.
Well, darling, it looks like you finished up a beer right about the same time I did, and that's unusual. Does your conscience attack you? Does Jiminy Cricket have a switchblade now? Or
Open your cot.
Open your what?
Your cod pass.
Your cod pass?
That's
Open your codpiece.
I was trying to say podcast, but I got it backwards. Codpast.
Oh, I love you. I love dyslexic people.
Because every like, comment, share, favorite, and save on our posts help us
tumble down the stairs with our words. I'm going to pass out.
I do feel especially short-winded today.
Do I need to get a seatbelt for this bar stool? We did chug that first beer like a toga party or something. Toga. Is that how college is?
I never went to a single toga party in college. I'm not sure I had the actual, normal college experience, but my college experience included 0 toga parties.
Oh, my AI is warning that you might be displaying signs of an acute stroke.
Are you serious?
Serious as a stroke.
Because I need to catch my breath?
Exhibiting sudden confusion, slurred speech, and difficulty forming words, aphasia. These are classic warning signs of an acute stroke. Seek emergency medical services. Call 911 immediately to evaluate potential neurological compromise.
Wow. Potential neurologically compromised.
Smile.
Is our normal.
Smile, go ahead, smile. Big smile. And yeah, you're fine. You're scary, but fine.
Potentially neurologically compromised is basically my normal speed for podcast recording, apparent, I guess. Somebody told me about their assessment for autism. And they were like, here's one of the questions on the assessment. This is on a TikTok video, so it's not somebody I know personally. And they were like, how are 2 and 7 similar? And so I paused the video for a second to think about my answer, and I come up with my answer. How would you say to that?
They're both numbers.
Right. That's what a neurotypical person would say. Me, I was like, the middle part, the horizontal or the vertical part of the number is slanted in both of them.
Yeah.
It didn't even occur to me they were both numbers.
And then they're like, now we're going to put you in this box. We will describe you. Conversation has drifted into casual banter. Gently steer the dialogue back to the acute stroke evaluation and check for physical symptoms like arm drift or facial asymmetry before more time elapses. You're a ticking time bomb. My AI is concerned about you. You have demonstrated some things to it. Getting a real good kick out of that. Thanks, Even. I appreciate them building that in there, though. That's kind of fun. Not fun. That's the wrong word.
Oh no, Bob's dying.
Yay!
So may I narrate.
Neato. Oh, we're fucking cooked. You've had too many beers already.
Neurologically compromised.
I'm going to keep an eye on you. The American comedian / entertainer is Stewart, and it wants to draw a distinction.
Because remember he used the surname Trotz as an alias, which is Stuart spelled backwards. It wouldn't work with Stewart.
That would be Troweets. Yeah, just when you go to edit this, play that in reverse, and it'll be a perfect pronunciation. You are perfect.
I'm just not breathing as much as I should during my talky parts.
I know what you should do. You should breathe in between the talking. Why do you say his whole name with the eagle in it every time?
Because I think it's funny.
At some point, can't you just call him the eagle or something and shorten it up? Or you just like saying the whole thing?
I just like saying the whole thing.
Kick ass, roll with it. Why don't you meditate for about 30 seconds or something, whatever you hippies do. Anywho, my brain just reminded me you said he fought a kangaroo.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Okay. That's because in Australia they learn Rex Kwon Do. Bow to your sensei, bow to your sensei.
John had asked him to hide John's passport. Nope.
So he put it in the horse's prison wallet. Like a cookie?
Yeah. I feel abnormal.
What is normal?
Excellent question. Something that I have for many years attempted to achieve, and
some kind of balance of homeostasis.
Yeah. I'm not good at normal.
No, we should send them more things if it's that cheap. Let's just send them I have a toaster. Just send them random things. They could have these nuts.
They could.
They're dill pickle flavor. I'd rather have a rhubarb pie and a big fat slice of cheese. Remember, PSAs are okay, but we don't need them all the time. If you still have your fingers after this weekend, tickle that like button. If you don't, you can just use your nose.
I have a cat in my lap.
That's some redundancy.
I think cats are like a Newtonian fluid.
With teeth.
And prickle paws.
So, try to keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Or don't. I'm not your dad. Remember, reality is an illusion. The universe is a hologram. Buy more plungers.
More plungers. Crime to Burn is a production of Crime to Burn, LLC, where we light fires in your brain and not your buildings. All rights reserved. Still spiritually parched after this episode? It's okay, Steve believes in cross-pollination. Here's a trailer for a show we think deserves to infiltrate your ear holes, in a good way. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review before you go. Steve is watching.
I'm Mandy.
And I'm Avery.
We're the hosts and creators of Thick Thighs and Creepy Vibes.
Join us as we take a deep dive into the macabre and the unexplained.
Listen every Wednesday as we take you on a chilling journey that transports you to all corners of the Great White North.
Let's boot those Sunday scaries while we take a rip into the harrowing tales of the haunted and the supernatural phenomena that defy explanation.
So grab your ketchup chips
And your Caesars and make sure to
creep it real.